What do you do when you witness a brutal act of disrespect? When an 85-year-old veteran, someone who gave everything for his country, gets shoved and punched in a crowded bar by a biker twice his size? Would you stand up? Would you step in? Or would you stay silent, hoping someone else would handle it? In this dusty, forgotten town, in a bar named the Iron Spur, that moment wasn't just a test of courage. It was a spark that lit a fire no one expected. Earl Matthews sat quietly in the corner, a man shaped by time and war. His face, weathered like cracked leather, told stories his lips never did. At 85, Earl's days of battle were behind him, or so everyone believed. The war had scarred his body but never crushed his spirit. The Iron Spur buzzed with the usual late-night crowd, old-timers, local workers, a few bikers who roared in like they owned the place. The jukebox played a slow country tune, mixing with the hum of conversation and the clink of glasses. Then the biker saw Earl. Maybe it was the old man's silence. Maybe it was the way Earl sat alone, proud but vulnerable. Whatever it was, the biker didn't hesitate. He stepped forward, eyes blazing with something dark, anger, disrespect, or just raw recklessness. Without warning, he shoved Earl hard, sending the veteran staggering back into the wooden chair. The crowd gasped. The jukebox faded under the sudden tension. "Get off me, punk!" Earl growled, gripping the chair arm to steady himself. But the biker wasn't done. A punch landed, quick, brutal, right across Earl's cheek. For a heartbeat, time froze. No one moved. The biker sneered, chest puffed like a rooster. "Old man, this is my turf." But in that instant, the bar changed. The atmosphere cracked like glass. People's eyes shifted from shock to fear, then to something else, regret. Because Earl wasn't just any man. And Earl's son? He was coming. Fast. With a team trained to handle worse than bar fights, Major Jack Matthews didn't believe in waiting. When he got the call, his father attacked, he dropped everything. 30 minutes later, a convoy of black SUVs and military vehicles rolled into town, engines low but fierce, like a beast stalking its prey. Jack wasn't just a soldier. He was a protector, a son who carried the weight of generations on his shoulders. And he wasn't coming to negotiate. The biker and his crew didn't know what hit them. They didn't realize the war they had started was about to end. This wasn't just a story about a punch. It was about respect, about honor, about a family that refused to be broken, and about justice arriving on wheels, roaring louder than any engine. In that dusty town, Earl Matthews had never asked for sympathy. He carried his scars like medals, quiet reminders of battles fought far from home. The deep lines on his face were etched not just by time, but by years of service in some of the most brutal campaigns of World War II. From the icy winters of the Ardennes to the blistering sands of North Africa, Earl had seen horrors most people only read about in books. Yet here he was, decades later, sitting alone in the Iron Spur, nursing a bourbon, battling a different kind of war, one fought with silence and solitude. The town around him had changed. The streets were rougher now, the people colder, and respect seemed like a fading memory. Earl had hoped that after everything, at least here, among neighbors and familiar faces, he'd be safe. But safety was a fragile thing, easily shattered by the harsh realities of a world that didn't always honor its heroes. The bikers had come roaring in like a thunderstorm, loud, intimidating, disruptive. Earl knew trouble when he saw it, but at 85, he also knew how to avoid it. His years in service had taught him when to fight and when to stand down. Tonight he chose to stand quietly, hoping the night would pass without incident. But fate had other plans. The biker who shoved him wasn't just rude or careless. There was something darker in his eyes, a reckless hunger to dominate, to prove power through cruelty. Maybe he thought Earl's age made him easy prey. Maybe he didn't care. What mattered was that the shove was more than physical. It was a slap to Earl's honor. The bar fell into a heavy silence after that shove. But inside Earl, something roared to life. Not anger, not just yet, but a cold determination. He wasn't going to let this slide. Later that night, Earl sat back in his creaky chair, nursing bruises no one could see, his thoughts spiraling. The memories of war flooded back, Comrades, lost, battles fought, the endless march of days filled with danger. And now, this? Being knocked down by a stranger in a place he once called sanctuary? He clenched his fists. This wasn't just about him. It was about respect, about legacy, about a lifetime of sacrifices no one seemed to notice anymore. Far from the bar, in a modest house surrounded by trees, Jack Matthews received the call. "Sir, your father's been attacked." Jack's military instincts kicked in immediately. No hesitation, no questions. He knew the town, the bar, and what an affront like this meant to his family's name. His hand tightened around the phone as his mind raced through what needed to happen next. Jack wasn't just a son. He was a major in the U.S. Army, a man responsible for leading elite strike teams in the most dangerous missions imaginable. He was trained for war zones, for chaos, for life-or-death decisions. But this was personal. Within minutes, Jack was gathering his closest team. Men and women he trusted with his life. Soldiers as disciplined as he was fierce. They moved fast, donning gear, loading equipment, preparing for a mission unlike any they'd faced overseas. The drive to the Iron Spur was tense. Jack's mind replayed memories of his father's stories, lessons of courage and sacrifice. He thought of Earl's steady hands, the quiet strength beneath the weathered exterior, and the injustice of what had happened. As the convoy rolled through the quiet streets, word had already spread. Whispers of the attack, the son's military response, and the storm that was coming sent ripples through the town. Inside the bar, the biker and his crew celebrated their moment of dominance, unaware of what was heading their way. They didn't know that the quiet old man they had shoved had a son ready to unleash a force forged in battle. Jack's arrival was more than a statement. It was a reckoning. The strike team moved with precision, surrounding the bar with an intensity that caught everyone off guard. The biker's bravado faded, replaced by uneasy glances and nervous laughter. Jack entered the bar, his presence commanding silence. His eyes locked onto the biker who had attacked his father. "You don't get to disrespect my family," Jack said, voice low and steady. The room was thick with tension. The biker's confidence wavered for the first time that night. But Jack wasn't there just to intimidate. He was there to remind the town, and everyone in it, that respect isn't optional. It's earned, and it's fiercely protected. The confrontation didn't explode into violence. Not that night. Instead, it set a new tone, one where honor mattered, where a son's love for his father translated into action, and where the past wasn't forgotten. As the strike team left, their message was clear. Cross the Matthews family. Again, and there would be consequences far beyond a bar fight. Earl watched the convoy disappear into the night, his heart full. He was bruised, yes, but also proud. His son had answered the call, not just for him, but for all who believe in standing up when it counts. And in that moment, Earl knew something else. Some battles never truly end. They just wait for the right moment to begin again. The night after the strike team's arrival was electric, buzzing with a tension that the small town hadn't felt in years. Whispers spread like wildfire. A veteran had been attacked, and his son, a military major, had come with a team trained for war. It wasn't just a bar fight anymore. It was personal. It was a warning. Inside the Iron Spur, the biker crew huddled in a corner, voices low and eyes darting nervously. The laughter that once filled the room had died down, replaced by silence thick with unease. The bikers weren't used to being challenged, much less by a father and son with such force behind them. Earl Matthews sat quietly, a quiet calm settling over him. His cheek still throbbed from the punch, but what weighed heavier was the shame of having been pushed around in his own town. He looked over at Jack, standing tall and alert, every muscle coiled like a predator, ready to strike again, if needed. Jack's presence was a shield, not just for Earl, but for everyone who believed respect still mattered. Jack didn't waste time. The first thing he did was call the local sheriff. "I want a full investigation," he said, voice steady but commanding. "This won't be swept under the rug." The sheriff nodded, a man caught between his duty and the fear of crossing the wrong crowd. But tonight, something was different. There was a force in Jack, the kind of force that made people reconsider their loyalties. As the night wore on, Earl shared stories of his service with a few trusted patrons, his voice steady despite the pain. The room listened, captivated by memories of battles fought, friends lost, and the price of freedom. His story reminded them that beneath the frail exterior was a man who had stood tall against impossible odds. Meanwhile, Jack prepared for what might come next. He knew the bikers wouldn't back down without a fight. This was their territory, rough, unforgiving, and ruled by codes that rarely included respect for the old or the weak. But Jack wasn't about to let fear rule his actions. His team had trained for moments like this, to face danger head-on, to protect what mattered most. Word spread quickly. By morning, the town was divided. Some saw Jack as a hero, a son who stood up for his father and reminded everyone what courage looked like. Others whispered about the dangers of military involvement in civilian matters, worried about retaliation. Then came the threats. A loud rumble echoed down the main street, motorcycles roaring back into town, darker and more menacing than before. The bikers weren't done. They wanted to reclaim their turf, to show that no one, not even a military major, could intimidate them. Jack's team moved swiftly. They reinforced their positions, ready for whatever came next. The streets became a chessboard, every move calculated, every moment charged with possibility. The confrontation was inevitable. Outside the iron spur, engines blared as the bikers circled, shadows flickering in the neon light. Inside, Jack gathered his team, voices low but urgent. "This ends tonight," Jack said. "No more games. We protect Earl. We protect this town, and we make sure they know what happens when you cross us." The air was thick with anticipation. The bikers approached, but this time, the balance of power had shifted. The town held its breath. Then, in the blink of an eye, the night exploded into chaos, a flurry of movement, shouts, and the clash of wills. But Jack and his team fought, with discipline and precision. Each move was controlled, calculated. No reckless violence, only the measured force necessary to protect and defend. And when the dust settled, the bikers were beaten back, their threat broken. The town had witnessed something remarkable, a battle fought not just with fists and weapons, but with honor and resolve. Earl watched it all, pride swelling in his chest. His son had shown the true meaning of family, courage, and respect. The fight wasn't just about a punch anymore. It was about reclaiming dignity. That night, the iron spur was quiet again, but the story was far from over. The town had changed. People talked differently, looked at Earl with new respect, and understood that sometimes the fiercest battles are fought not on distant fields, but in places we call home. Jack stayed by his father's side, knowing the road ahead would be long. But for the first time in years, hope had found a foothold in this small town, because when family stands together, no force, no biker gang, no darkness can break their bond. The town was still reeling from the showdown. News had spread, far beyond the iron spur. Videos, whispers, and rumors turning the Matthews family story into a local legend overnight. But for Jack and Earl, the battle wasn't over. It had only just begun. Jack knew that the bikers' retreat wasn't surrender. It was a regroup. They'd been humiliated in front of the whole town, and that stung worse than any punch. Pride, loyalty, and fear of losing face would drive them to come back harder, smarter, angrier. The next morning, as the sun sliced through the dusty windows of Earl's modest home, the silence was deceptive. Jack was already awake, running through every possible scenario in his mind. Every threat, every angle, every vulnerability. He stood beside his father, whose spirit, though battered, was unbroken. Earl's steady gaze met Jack's. "They're going to try again," Earl said softly, "but I'm ready." Jack felt a surge of pride. "We'll be ready too. I won't let anyone hurt you, not again." But Earl's story wasn't just about what had happened at the bar. It was about a life of battles that shaped a man's soul, and about a son who would stand tall to defend that legacy. Earl had fought in wars that demanded courage beyond understanding, where fear was constant and survival never guaranteed. He carried the weight of those memories every day, but he never let them define him. Instead, he used them to teach Jack what true strength meant, not just muscle or guns, but heart and honor. That morning, Jack gathered his team for a crucial briefing. "We can't underestimate them," he said. "They know the stakes. They'll come prepared. We have to be smarter, faster, stronger." His team nodded. They were battle-tested, but this mission was different. Less about enemy combatants, and more about protecting a legacy, a family, and a town that needed justice. The day passed slowly, filled with preparation and unease. Jack doubled the security around Earl's home. He reached out to local law enforcement, urging them to be vigilant. But there was an edge of frustration. Some in the town wanted to forget, to move on, and the bikers knew it. Then, as dusk bled into night, a new kind of threat emerged. A loud crash shattered the quiet. Headlights flooded Earl's porch as dark figures appeared, moving with dangerous intent. The bikers were back, this time armed, ready for confrontation. Jack's team sprang into action. The standoff was brutal and tense, the air thick with danger. Words were exchanged, warnings shouted, and for a moment the line between peace and chaos blurred. But then something unexpected happened. One of the bikers stepped forward, not with a weapon, but with a plea. "I didn't want it to go this far," he said, voice rough but sincere. "We didn't mean to disrespect your old man. He's earned more than that." The room fell silent. Jack stared, searching for any sign of deception. Earl's eyes softened. It was a fragile truce, but a truce nonetheless. The bikers agreed to back down, not because of fear, but because respect had been earned the hard way. In the days that followed, the town began to heal. The bar, once a place of tension and division, became a gathering spot for stories of resilience and redemption. Earl and Jack were no longer just a father and son. They were symbols of courage standing against injustice. Their bond, tested in fire, had sparked a change in a community that needed it most. As Jack watched his father smile again, the weight of battle lifted. He realized that the fiercest wars aren't always fought with weapons. Sometimes, they're fought with the strength to forgive, the courage to stand tall, and the love that refuses to back down. Because in the end, family isn't just blood. It's the fight you're willing to take on together, no matter the cost. The weeks after the confrontation felt like a slow sunrise breaking through a long, dark night. The tension that had gripped the town finally began to loosen. The Iron Spur was no longer just a bar where silence hid grudges and old wounds. It became a place of stories. Stories of a veteran's courage, a son's fierce loyalty, and a community learning to respect its past while looking forward. Earl Matthews moved with a quiet dignity that touched everyone who crossed his path. His bruises faded, but the mark of what had happened lingered, like an invisible tattoo, reminding him and others that respect must be fought for, no matter the age or circumstance. He spent more time with his son Jack, sharing moments that had once been lost in the chaos of life. The battles abroad had been many, but the battles at home, those were different. They were about heart, about healing, about legacy. Jack watched his father with a new kind of admiration. Not just for the man who had served his country with honor, but for the man who faced down cruelty in his own town and stood firm. The community began to shift, too. People who had once turned their backs started to listen. Local leaders reached out, promising to do better for the veterans who had shaped their world. The bikers? Some faded away, humbled by the show of strength and respect. Others stayed, but with a new understanding etched into their code. Earl's story became more than just an incident. It became a lesson that courage isn't only about facing enemies on distant battlefields. It's about standing up when it's easier to walk away. It's about protecting family and honoring the sacrifices made long before. One afternoon, Jack and Earl sat on the porch of Earl's house, the sun warm on their faces. They didn't need to speak much. The silence between them was full of gratitude, pride, and the quiet peace that comes after a storm. Jack broke the silence. "Dad, you taught me everything. About strength, about respect, about what it means to fight for the people you love. Earl smiled, eyes glistening with something more than age. And you taught me that sometimes the fight never ends. But when you have the right people by your side, no darkness is too deep. That moment held the weight of 1,000 unspoken battles. Outside, life moved on. The town rebuilt, healed, and remembered. But for Earl and Jack, the story was far from over. It was a legacy handed down like a torch, burning bright against the night. Their journey was a reminder that true heroes don't always wear medals or camouflage. Sometimes they wear weathered faces, carry silent scars, and fight the toughest battles at home. So what about you? When faced with injustice, when the world feels cold and unfair, what will you stand for? What battles will you fight? And who will stand with you? Because every story, every moment of courage, starts with a choice. The choice to rise, to fight, and to never back down. Months had passed since that unforgettable night, the night when a punch changed everything. The dust had settled, but the echoes of courage and family loyalty still reverberated through the town. Earl Matthews had become more than just the elderly veteran who was shoved in a bar. He was a symbol, a reminder that respect is earned, protected, and never given lightly. Jack stood beside his father, watching the sunset paint the sky in fiery oranges and deep purples. The war they'd faced wasn't just in distant lands. It had come home. But together they had faced it head-on, side by side. Their story had stirred something deep inside the community. Veterans found new voices. Neighbors found new respect. Even the bikers who once ruled the night had begun to change their ways, softened by the realization that strength isn't only about muscle, but about honor. But the most powerful change was in Earl and Jack themselves. Earl, once quiet and reserved, now spoke openly about his experiences, his lessons, and the price of standing up for what's right. Jack had discovered that courage isn't only about battle tactics and military precision. It's about heart, patience, and protecting what matters most. Theirs was a story of redemption, strength, and unbreakable bonds. As the sun dipped below the horizon, Jack turned to Earl and said, "Dad, no matter what comes next, we'll face it, together." Earl smiled, his eyes shining with pride. "Always." And that's the truth at the heart of every fight, every challenge. Family, loyalty, and the courage to stand tall when it matters most. What would you do if you were in their shoes? How far would you go to protect those you love? Tell us your thoughts in the comments below. Have you ever stood up for someone against all odds? If you found this story inspiring, don't forget to like, share, and subscribe for more powerful stories like this. Because sometimes the strongest battles are fought not on distant fields, but right here at home.